My name is 𝐂𝐨Renee Little, and I serve as President and CEO of the TJ Alumni Action Group. I'm here this afternoon to talk with Merle Rutledge, 2021 Republican candidate for governor of Virginia. The topic of our conversation, ending modern day school segregation, is complex, multifaceted, and vitally important. But first, I'd like to recognize our sponsors. The Ending Modern Day School Segregation series is a collaborative effort of nonprofits who decided to partner in support of their joint mission for education equity throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. This series is brought to you by anti-racist alumni of Maggie Walker Governor School, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, CASA in Action, Christopher Newport University's Center for Education, Research, and Policy, Lewis Academy Now, the Chesterfield County branch of the NAACP, the Fairfax County branch of the NAACP, NACASEC Action Fund, the Proudly Diverse Caucus, and the Thomas Jefferson Alumni Action Group. Just to provide a brief overview of the issue, the US Supreme Court found racial segregation in schools to be unconstitutional in 1954. And even while our students learn about historical struggle to desegregate schools during the civil rights era, here we are, 67 years later, with an education system that both reflects and arguably perpetuates racial inequities. A recent report found that nationally, more than half of school children are in racially concentrated school districts, and that predominantly white public schools receive approximately $23 billion more in annual state and local funding than schools with predominantly non-white student bodies, despite serving about the same number of students. At the same level, Virginia has a deeply troubling history surrounding school segregation. At the height of the civil rights movement, the state was at the forefront of massive resistance, opposing schools desegregation and closing schools and even entire districts in order to not racially integrate them. And even creating more than 20 segregation academies, which were private schools that remained white only until they too were found unconstitutional in 1976. Within the classroom, we continue to face profound racial challenges, from racial gaps in education achievement and disciplinary action disproportionately taken against non-white students, to the unequal impact of COVID-19 pandemic on students of color. And these topics are all on the table this afternoon. Let me introduce our guest. Merle Travis Rutledge Jr. graduated from Dan River High School. While a student at Norfolk State University, Mr. Rutledge founded a chapter of Phi Delta Psi Fraternity Incorporated and advocated to build the first voting precinct on the university's campus. He has served as a volunteer for numerous organizations within the Commonwealth, such as Children of the Sun, the Urban League of Hampton Roads, Centara Hospital, and Big Brothers and Big Sisters Association. Currently, Mr. Rutledge advocates for low-income communities at local, state, and national levels, and works on public policy and civil rights issues in the Danville and Pittsylvania County areas. Merle, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Excuse me. Well, under the weather, but I'm doing just fine. That was a wonderful introduction. I can say that part. Here at Dan River High School, here at Norfolk State University. Oh, it brings you back in the time. And it's great to be here, and thanks for having me. Thank you.
We really appreciate your engagement. And as I said before, this afternoon's conversation will be focused on ending modern day school segregation. For those in the audience who may be new to this issue, can you start by giving us a bit of background? For you, what is modern day school segregation?
Modern day school segregation, a lot compared that to the critical race theory that's being taught in schools. Some things are not going to change because of just policy decisions. Some things have to change as far as the individual and the mentality that people think on. Racism is not going to go away, but throughout time we have seen improvements where people from different walks of life are now congregating. They have to, whether it's from work, school, or everyday life. And the fact is, it is elements that still exist, and whether it's in schools or not. But like I said, we can do a lot better on making sure that people can start looking at people less for the color of their skin, but the content of their character.
Thank you for that. So you mentioned critical race theory, and one of the purposes of teaching students history is to ensure that they learn from past events to improve society in the future. Would you encourage educators to lead conversations with their students around race and school segregation?
It really depends on the teacher. I'm betting against the critical race theory if it's based off one race being superior than another race. I always believe that there's no such thing as somebody telling somebody to be less black, less white, less of anything of who they are, but to accomplish your goals and dreams and continue telling our children that. Just like if you tell a child they are going to be a screw up all their life, whether they're black, white, or Hispanic, they're going to be conditioned to think that they are a screw up. But on the other side of things is if you tell them, hey, you can achieve anything you want, and you keep nourishing that attitude and that, never quit attitude, then you're going to start seeing where it's not about race, it's really about your effort on accomplishing your goals and doing the work. So that's what I was meaning by that part. I do understand that we should teach history, but we should be very real about it. I can say that part. A lot of time frames, old lessons and old history lessons was more so done to, kind of whitewash certain parts of history. And I believe we need to have a history or history classes where people can choose which type of history they want to learn, whether it is Black history, whether it is anything with even, Greek. But we need to do better no matter what, because we are in this situation because of what the climate has became here in America.
So you mentioned how, effort in I guess what you tell students can impact their performance. Black students make up 22% of Virginia's total student population, but 52% of all student suspensions. Out of Virginia's 132 school districts, 127 of these divisions exhibit a statistically significant disproportionality among Black students' suspensions. So as governor, how would you address this disparity?
Well, one of the things we have to make sure we are doing is making sure parents are just as involved in children's discipline and curriculum, or their education, as the teachers. Because when you're getting suspended, it's a sign that there's something wrong, especially given what's going on. And we have to really find out what is really the origin for a child to be suspended or get in trouble. Now, we all been kids, so we all have either had a fight or something like that. But we have also, for those who have succeeded beyond that, have changed their attitude and moved forward just fine. But one of the things we have to do is make sure we have real numbers, no padding the numbers or trying to, keep funding because you want to say you don't have this much trouble when the problem really exists. We have to really design policies based off the truth. But if it's a lot of suspensions going on, and it is, reflecting the African American community, as a governor or as a leader, I still have to make sure I speak to that area, go to that area, and find out what is going on. We can't just speak from a distance and say, hey, we know this area, but we never even made a trip there. That's kind of like, judging the area without actually, being at ground zero. But we also have to make sure we tell all kids, you are going to be accountable for your actions. But we must also be mindful that as kids, we make mistakes. But a mistake doesn't have to be your permanent situation. And that's what we really have to focus on. We got to understand the difference between kids being kids and then that suspension. And then we have to start working on, is there a real problem? And whether it's mental health services, whether it's tutoring, whether it's something going on at the home. But the thing is, we only can go but so um, far as governance. Some things have to be handled, by the agencies, and we got to find out where the problem is by the truth, not by, any kind of padded numbers or false data. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Speaking of resources, according to 2019 Virginia Department of Education data, students with disabilities, which include deaf, hard of hearing, and neurodiverse students, have the lowest rates of enrollment in advanced placement classes, graduating with advanced diplomas, and attending college upon high school graduation. How would you propose supporting these students to help maximize their potential?
Wow, that's a great question. I was just thinking about that actually yesterday. And I said, said to another kid yesterday, I said, you don't realize how blessed you are. It's a troublemaker. This kid always whatever, but always get them back on track and keep them focused. I said, you got people with disabilities and you got people who are so sick and more, and they still trying to strive for an education. And I'm like, you're ruining your opportunity because you're stuck on race issue. And realistically, I know the kids, so I have every reason to believe it's not about race, it's about effort. And I'm just like, you're missing the whole point here. God gave you a gift, and right now you just ruin it. And I was like, people with disabilities, people may not have a leg or arm, blind, can't see. They got to go through so much disadvantage just to get an education, and they're still striving. I said, you don't have no excuse. So the way we help them is directly making sure they have more counselors, number one. Two, that they have therapists on each school grounds, making sure that they continue their therapy. We need to make sure speech teachers are there, because a lot of people, I grew up where I didn't even realize I had a speech problem. I still do, but I had to start working on it at the second grade level because, of course, they recognize, my speech was off. I was saying three, and I'm probably saying it wrong now because I don't continuously have a speech teacher. But we must make these reasonable accommodations, and they are protected by federal law. And we will do everything to make sure the funds go directly where it needs to go. Because I've worked with special education students in high school. That was one of the things of doing advanced PE. So you can understand the complexities of what people have to go through. Because just because they're disabled, I try to treat everybody human beings, because I pray to God never to be in that situation or to see anybody else in that situation. But it makes you recognize you need to be humble and make sure if they're not making excuses to wake up in the morning and go to school, our kids don't have no excuse to not to, and they have everything and no, not the same disadvantages as them. And we will do everything to make sure they have a proper education with reasonable accommodations and making sure the funding goes in that direction because it needs it the most. Thank you.
I appreciate that response. How do you feel modern day school segregation intersects with school choice? And is that something you support?
I actually support school choice because I'm a long-term thinker. And this is where people on both sides of the aisle have the worst way of messaging. They make it into a hate-filled thing when it's actually can be more inclusive, as long as you have the right person, giving out information. The reason why I'm so much for school choice because of modern technology. We are seeing virtual classes being done all over the state since the pandemic, and kids are basically behind right now. And certain students learn better from certain teachers. And what I'm saying is, even with teachers, teachers have to be aware that the classes that they're teaching now can be recycled for a new class. And eventually they are going to start cutting jobs as this pandemic worsens and we start really seeing the real effects that is being covered up outside the COVID relief funds. Because we was in trouble before the new COVID package even hit. Now we are getting that false sense of security right now. I'm telling teachers, become entrepreneurs right now and start being prepared that any time frame they can cut your job. So my thing is, I may not learn great from one teacher, but I can make A's all over the place from another teacher. Doesn't mean the teacher is less qualified than the other. It just means that this teacher is a better teacher for me. Just like I may be a better messenger for them. We need to put the tax credits so kids can get an education anywhere. But what I will tell any child at this time frame, with the internet or the superhighway, we have access to information that was once used to be held secret because they didn't want us to know anything further than what the government wanted us to know, unless you had a security clearance or more. We cannot miss out on this opportunity. If you want to learn from the best in Harvard, you have those classes on YouTube right now. It's really about how much you want to obtain information, and that's really freedom. And what is school choice is really right now what we are doing. We are basically giving out different answers or different lessons to our youth and to ourselves every time frame we are online. So it's not really hurtful. It's actually great for us to start looking at other options, because realistically, a lot of the troublemaking that's going on because people feel like they can't learn from this particular teacher. And we put the tax credits, we start putting the vouchers out there and say, hey, if you want to learn from somewhere else or go to another school, we need to give you more access. We need STEM school. We need votex within 30 minutes so kids can actually go to school, get a career. I want our kids to also have a 2-year college degree upon walking across that stage. At this time frame, we could Google up every single answer we need. That's not learning. That's just saying, hey, we learn how to Google more. We need to make our schools tougher, provide better education, and start changing our books to more modern times. And right now, it's at the college level right now. And this also reduces debt for our kids because they don't have to have 4 years of college taking loans and all this and hundreds of thousands of dollars with no certainty that they're going to have a job that can really hit that debt in a significant way and move on. The fact is, I'm not against those who are behind learning more, but I am against us feeling like they're disabled, handicapped, or we can't get this job done. Because I'm going to tell you one thing. I used to be a DF student. In 10th grade, I recognized my life needed to change. I had to start looking at what I'm going to do after high school. I ended up being an A, B student all the way out of high school and into college. That's because we had to start recognizing, what do you want to do in life? Do you want to be a success or a failure? And I believe I just gave you a bunch of policies within that one, but it lets you know how serious I am about education and preparing our youth now, not later. Thank you.
And I really appreciate your passion for that. I'm glad that you bring up the fiscal component of school choice and vouchers. And according to 2018-2019 state data, approximately $12,000 is spent to educate each student within the Commonwealth. Individual school budgets, staffing, and programming is thereby determined based on that pooling of those resources provided by local, state, and federal funding on a per student basis. So when racial and socioeconomic groups cluster within school districts, it leaves other schools within the same school district under-resourced, especially when schools have those additional resources, sometimes provided by fiscally resourceful PTAs, right? As an advocate of school choice, what would be your approach to ensure students have equal access to programs available to others within their same school district?
This is interesting too, because a lot of people talk about even the gifted program. I'm glad you brought up the funding per child at 12,000. Of course, that would need to increase. I believe we are going under my leadership to have new revenue to increase that from 12,000, hopefully to 18,000, where the additional resources is there, plus the tax credits that people will have for books, gas, going back and forth, and more that's happened under the pandemic once the schools was closed, where we did not look at, how much of a significant cost occurred to parents under those changes. We have to fix that. But you was asking a question about the fact of how do we achieve this gap. Um, the first thing we have to do is start looking at one, like I said, real numbers and not padded. You had a second part to this question because I know I answered part of that one. Can you give me that second part to that question one more time? I just want to make sure I stay on track.
I appreciate that. So when racial and socioeconomic groups cluster, right? So it's like, okay, like you mentioned how if I learn better from this teacher or if this program is available and I want to go there, then that's where I'm going to go. So just research based parents tend to kind of cluster where they feel there are better resources or more options for programs, which leave other schools within that same district under-resourced because all the money associated with those students is now concentrated in those schools. So how would you ensure students in the other schools within the same school district now still have access to those resources?
Okay, and that was the reason why I wanted to stay on track, and you just hit the point. Like for instance, a lot of people are gifted or meant for gifted classes or government school, but they have no clue about those opportunities unless somebody tells them about it, which is totally unfair. I have met plenty of gifted people that should have been in these programs, and most of them say, I just didn't know about it, or the school system didn't choose or pick me. The fact is, we need to make sure every student has the opportunity to have the same opportunity to go to gifted school or be in the gifted program, or government school as anybody else, and make sure that parents are aware. And this is where transparency comes into play. I'm very big on making sure people know every single program that they could be in, making sure before school starts that there is a session where students and parents are mandatory so people can explain these are the programs that your child could be in. We are not going to stop them from being there by some kind of criteria. Now, if they need to fall back from some of those programs because we are seeing that they're not learning or they are not keeping up with the pace of work, then okay, that's different. But we should not deny anybody the opportunity to try. Even for an F student, we should give them the opportunity to be in the gifted program or in the government school, just like anybody else. The same way with VOTEC or whatever. We also got to understand that our children are not going to choose the same path as other children. We got to know that. And we got to understand that not everybody is going to be successful in the school system. And that's just the sad reality we have. That's why you have school systems and the government also looking at how many prison cells we need to have just in case for these certain amount of students in the classroom, and they go by the school system and who's failing and who's being suspended. Okay, we need to build another jail. More than we need to do is build another school where they can focus and learn better and grow. And that's been the problem. We give up too much. And I want every child to know, and that's what we have to keep instilling. This is where the parents and teachers and government officials all have to play their part in working together. We have to stay on top of this and making sure that everybody has the same opportunity. And a lot of people, sad to say, just doesn't know about it. And once people know about it, we can start saying, hey, we brought this up. This is what was the results, and this is what happens. But it's so sad to say that we have missed out decades worth of talent. Those who may have been in those programs instead of not knowing about it. Imagine how successful they would have been if they had the chance to try. And you know, parents, they want the best for their children. So they're going to want them in these programs. Sometimes you got to keep nourishing somebody's ability, especially when you know that they are going to be the best at whatever they want to do. And sometimes by us, downgrading them or keeping them at a level, sometimes God doesn't mean to have you at that level. Sometimes he wants you achieving, working hard, going through obstacles. That builds you. That doesn't break you. That makes you who you are. The harder it is, so you are able to understand that everything comes from hard work and dedication, not from the color of your skin or your financial situation. But it's a situation where we must hold each other accountable, and this is how we fix that gap. Transparency is the biggest key to this one. And I'm so sorry to those from the past that we should did this a lot sooner, not later, and we should have never denied people the access to the same opportunities or the same resources that others will have. And I'll make sure executive order is there that each student has an opportunity. Now, it may not have the same outcome, but they deserve the right to try. Thank you.
So just to be clear, your position is that ensuring people are aware of all the opportunities would be how you ensure that they have access to the programs. Is that correct?
Well, it's one thing to be aware. Is another thing to make sure you are not denied the opportunity, because you can fill out an application and anybody could deny it and just throw it in the trash can. No, we are not denying anybody the opportunity to be a part of those programs. That's where we are changing it from. Because back in the day, you had counselors and all these other figures decide on how well or how successful your child is going to be, and they will recommend not to put you in these programs, and you wouldn't be put in these programs. No, if your child wants an opportunity, they are guaranteed the opportunity, but it's their choice if they succeed or fail. And that's where I'm doing, that's what I'm doing that is different from others. I'm making sure you have the opportunity, and you can't be denied just because of what somebody else thinks. Give the kids a chance to do what they want to do and succeed.
Just to kind of stay on that point, how would you encourage, I guess, counselors and those who are essentially tracking students at a young age? How would you approach maybe, changing that tide?
Well, with counselors, we know they're needed, but it's brief or, of course, planning a child's career and giving them, whatever resources and opportunity that they can. But our counselors need to also be evaluated regularly too, and how they feel. Because some counselors have been the reason why children did not want to continue achievement for success. They felt like the counselors had broke them down, made them feel belittled them. And it could have dealt with social, ties, whether it's racial or whether it's financial, whatever it may be. Our counselors are so quick to give up and to throw a file. It's like a jail and an inmate, and here's your number. Okay, I finished talking to you. Goodbye. Let's get out. Just get out my office. We have to do a much needed overhaul with counseling and making sure it's directed towards career choice and opportunity, and focusing on our kids having education and not ever labeling them or making them feel like they are less than who they are and that they can't achieve just like any other child. And that's where we will start making that mandatory, that we are here to uplift and make sure they achieve their goals and have the opportunity to do so. That's where counseling needs to be at, not anybody pushing somebody down and saying, hey, behind closed doors, I believe you're only going to work at a restaurant. And I've seen plenty of people work at a restaurant and end up running this whole, running this whole country. So I think we have to make sure we pay attention to what our kids is learning and what they're receiving. And that's with peers, students, and teachers. It got to be proactive on all sides. Thank you.
So still kind of in this realm, I know one of the recommendations from the African American History Education Commission was to focus on ensuring that educators are given training in cultural competency. I understand your sentiments on critical race theory, but what are your thoughts on training educators to be more culturally competent?
The worst thing about this is who's the one doing the training, and that's really going to play a part here, because if that was the case, we should have been ready not in 2021. This should have been in the year 2000. It's one thing to focus on this issue of critical race theory and more, but it's another thing to say all of a sudden you have a program for this, and we have experienced the worst of the worst throughout time, and all of a sudden the program just magically came here. No, it didn't. The fact is, I believe that yes, as a teacher, as somebody who continues their education, yes, you should learn by cultural differences, but learn about it through experience and actually being around that background. There's no better teacher than experience. But to have somebody else teach you how to be more inclusive or whatever, I tell people, evil is sometimes inherited in people. It doesn't matter how much you try to teach them, they are not going to change regardless of how you decide to spend it. Doesn't mean I want to give up on them. It just says at this time period, it's funny how all of a sudden they cared about this, being part of the indoctrination cycle only a few years ago into what we have now as treating kids as saying at birth you're inherently racist depending on what race you are. That is so negative. And honestly, I never met a child who hated upon birth who hated another child, let alone knew what they was going to be at 1 years old or as a toddler. The fact is, the best thing we can do is have experience. And I believe America is getting better just because the media has it out there that it's all this division. It's not that divided. I have friends of all backgrounds and ethnic groups, and realistically, I love them to death. It's only what people put out there that makes people think that there is a real huge problem. Realistically, we got to get back to the basics and learning how to love one another and treat each other the way you want to be treated. And that's how we get past this. We got to stop telling kids that there's something wrong with you because of the color of your skin. That's opposite of Dr. Martin Luther King's dream, or putting a prejudice or bias just because of what race you are. I know plenty of people who are of a different race that would jump into a lake to save another child of another race life. The fact is, we are better than ever as far as being inclusive and having more of these conversations than we ever have had before. And we are getting much, much better. I just think that, the media has made this into a for-profit to have us, divided. And honestly, we see people of different backgrounds and ethnicities every day. We are learning from each other every single day. The problem is others outsiders telling us how to treat each other when we know how to treat each other all in itself. I think it's a waste of funding. I believe that the more people that keep, come into areas from different states and more, we are having the training by real experience. And no book is going to teach us about that part. We're going to have to find out for ourselves, and most of us do. And that's how I feel about that one.
I appreciate you bringing up experiences. So, steps away from the governor's mansion, there is a statue honoring Barbara Johns, inscribed with the words of Justice Thurgood Marshall. And it says, "Unless our children begin to learn together, there is little hope that our people will ever learn to live together." So if elected governor, this statement is something that you would see on a daily basis. What are your thoughts on that statement?
It's true. The more that you're around other people, the more that you understand them, you understand the cultural differences, you understand what is against their culture or whatever. We got to get back to, we can't agree to disagree, but we can show respect. But it's okay at your house may not be okay at my house. So, certain rules and things you can't do at my house. But I never say you can't come over to my house. You see what I'm saying? You're welcome to see how we live life, whether it's at my house or on the street. And I believe that statue is something that we need. And we need to keep statues of a bit everything, because this is our history. This is how we brought up. This is how we made it to this moment now that we are at today. And I would love to see that statue. And I'll tell anybody visiting the Capitol, I'll say, make sure you go to that statue and read exactly what's up there, because it says that we learn from each other. We are not against each other, because the more we figure out a way to separate each other, the more distance we create. It's like social distancing, but we are doing it for not COVID, but we're doing it because of it's self-inflicted. We got to be able to come together and talk to people from all walks of life. And this is how we get that conversation started. And I believe that statue has a lot of meaning to me or anybody else, because we all had our prejudice and bias. And I've learned, hey, throughout time, I'm 40, I'm too old for it. I love people for who they are. You treat me right, I treat you right, and we should be able to have a discussion civilly. I should not have to burn down your house or destroy your business in order for us to have this discussion. Because realistically, that wasn't how we was brought up. We was never brought up to go to our parents' house and say, if I don't get what I want, or I don't like you, I'm going to burn down your house. That's KKK politics. That's not who we are as Americans. And realistically, I'm so glad we have so many cultures here in America to learn from and ask questions to. The thing is, we sometimes hold ourselves back because we won't walk up to somebody and say, hey, I want to know who you are. I want to know about your background. You know how much that would do, instead of coming up to somebody, oh, I hate you for this. I was told to hate you. I was told to be divided against you. You see the difference of how that interaction is in that few seconds. One's attacking, the other one's saying, let's be inclusive. So a lot of the problems we have is about dispute resolution, or how we conduct ourselves with each other. And before all this madness with the George Floyd and vice versa, we was having these conversations. Then it became boom, boom, separated. We are now having the conversation. That's the good thing about America and good thing about the schools now, the way it is. We are having the conversations that we used to never be able to have with other races, groups, even online. We having conversations with people in another country. It's getting better. The problem is they won't cover it like that. I'm sorry.
No. I appreciate your perspective. If you can help me understand how we might have these conversations that actually lead to changes in, behavior as far as desegregating our schools, when you state that you feel as though some people are inherently evil. So how do we, legislate to ensure that these inherently evil people that you feel exist are more open to dialogue and conversation?
This is where mental health services come into play. But I wish the world was perfect, people. I wish it was. It's not. We wouldn't have prisons if it wasn't for people who decide we can tell them every single time to do the right thing and they just want to do the wrong thing. There's no way to stop that part. The only thing we could do is say we did what we could do to keep you from being in the jail or a body bag. Some people just don't care to that point. But I do want to get to mental health services and do some real funding there, even from the police. They say a lot of times they don't even want to lock people up. They feel like it's a mental health condition that if there was a clinic or a bed, they would take them there instead of having them process in the justice system in the jails. The fact is, people are hurting right now more than ever before. Everybody suffered through these lockdowns and everything else. Whether you was the brightest person on the block or you thought you had it all together, we all got put in a situation that we never experienced before. And we are still working on that. I'm still working on that. I can tell you, with all of this is a different world. When I walk outside, it's a different world. People are scared to go out. I'm seeing people masks. I'm seeing everything had to become an adjustment very quickly. We was put into this situation and nobody was prepared for it.
So just to be clear, so that we're not misunderstanding, is it your position that everything regarding race relations, it seems as though you're describing, was good pre-pandemic, but we're suffering more now because of COVID?
Yes, we are still suffering from mental health services because people are not getting the treatment. Where the funding should have went right now is getting people out of their fears right now, getting them back to life. People are sometimes, a lot of people are scared to walk out their doors right now. They are. The reason is because we have spent more time selling the fear instead of saying, hey, we need for you to come back into society and get back into this, our regular normal. And mental health services is really underfunded. I want a health clinic or a mental health hospital within an hour of every city or county in Virginia and having adequate beds and more. Realistically, when people are going to struggle. We don't know what people are going through. And that's why I encourage people to this day. If you see somebody going through something, let's walk up to them and say, how you doing today? How you feeling today? You know, let them know that you care. The reason is because a lot of these people feel that nobody cares about them, so they react, you know, in that type of way. What I'm saying is right now, I would do everything in my power, because that is one of the ways we get out of this and start actually being more inclusive also, and bridging the gap of diversity, it by making sure people are getting the services that they need, especially with mental and physical health at this time period, because that's going to be the breakthrough for us getting back to normal.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Final question. Um, Thinking in terms of immediate actions, let's say you're elected in November and take office in January 2022. What are the first 2 or 3 education related policy initiatives that you'd immediately begin working toward implementing?
It would be school choice. And also making sure that teachers are given the green light to start becoming entrepreneurs and becoming private teachers, as well as teaching in our public schools as well. I will also relax the rules on college students to now be able to actually teach in our schools. So whenever a pandemic or something like this happens, we have more teachers, because realistically, a lot of teachers either laid off or quit their jobs. And that's the reason why a lot of schools is not running with in-person learning, because they don't have the teachers anymore. Um, I was basically say, hey, you know, college students and those who are qualified to teach classes, hey, we got to get you ready sooner than later. So we have what they call career keepers and stuff like that, and bringing these teachers in so the students can actually have opportunity to have smaller class sizes, and also better educators that are learning on the job. So that would be 2 of my major focuses, and making sure we have mental health services for our kids so they can talk about what they've been through throughout this pandemic. A lot of us is not looking at what the kids have been through, because we're trying to keep our sanity. And it should be family counseling to that part. And this is how we start bridging those gaps in between of education and more, because we start seeing that we all trying to work with each other to get past this point, and not look at each other's race as division, but look at each other as those who are looking to help each other get out of this. And that's where I would be focused on. I said 3 basically. I know you wanted 2, but I felt like mental health services and more is one thing that's not being talked about enough. And we need to really do something about this one, because if you're thinking better, you make better decisions. When your mind is just all over the place, you have chaos. And a lot of times, when people take that deep breather and get a chance to really see what's going on with themselves, they can actually, you know, start looking at better ways for them to handle things. And that's what we're looking for, people to be on board, but focus with clarity. And that's how we do better for ourselves and for our children, when we are thinking about things in a better way. And that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Okay, well, since you gave me 3 instead of 2, then I got one more question for you. Can you define, lastly, for school choice and its relationship to public and private schools and the impact on modern day school segregation?
I want the youth to know all across this country, there's not a child better than you, or nor are you better than any child. Whether it's in private school or public school, we have the happy medium to say we're going to work hard, because my sister and many others came from public schools and they are great out there. You know, they are known all over the world. And it's because they never gave up. Whenever it became to a class that they had, they did the extra research. Not only did they go to the books, they went and found the books that was taught in Harvard. They went on YouTube. They went to Google. They did extra. They didn't settle for the definition. They found out how the definition actually applied not only to in their household, but in the real world. Just because somebody came from Harvard doesn't make them better than graduating from Norfolk State University. You take every single opportunity to continue to strive. If somebody is spending their time just being going to class and playing basketball, Well, go to class and go to the library. Go to the library. If you ain't been gotten the answer there, go to your teacher, go to your mentor. Don't stop until you actually get an answer and you get achievement. That's where we are separating ourselves from private to public school. You can get an education anywhere. But the thing is, if you decide that you want to give up and you don't want to do the additional work while you watching other kids do the additional work, whether they're Black, white, or Hispanic, then they are going to do better because they're doing actual work. So when it comes down to private or public school, it really doesn't matter unless you put in the work. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be making sure week after week, our kids have a daily or weekly message from me saying you can achieve no matter if you're in public or private school. Sometimes we got to get back to being accountable and responsible for the work we put in. And as soon as we start doing that, you'll start seeing more success. And we have to have the parents and more on board because we all got to start saying to ourselves, education isn't just at the high school or college level, it's throughout life. And that's exactly what I want to say to deal with the private and public school education. We have the access that we never had before. And that's exactly the door we need to open for equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rutledge, so much. We really appreciate you making time for this conversation. We know you're busy and taking an hour out of your day to engage on this very important topic. We can't thank you enough.
And thank you for having me on this show. It brought me back in the time. Like you said, Dan River High School, Norfolk State. I really hear that. And I so much appreciate where people I came from to get to this point so they know you can do it too. Because my run is very historic. I don't talk.
I think we lost Mr. Rutledge's video, but we thank you all for engaging and watching this conversation as well. Again, we want to thank our sponsors and we look forward to, oh, you're back. Huh? Well, we just want to say thank you again and say we'll see our audience next time. Thank you. Good luck with your campaign.
Thank you and have a wonderful day. I didn't know I was on mute, but that's all.
Okay.